What's up, y'all? We are gonna get started in just a second here. Thank you all for joining. Good evening, y'all. We're gonna get started here. So, my name is Zara, and with the Multicultural Solidarity Coalition. Um, and we're this is the third town hall that we're doing. This one's called Crow's Co-optation, and we're gonna be talking about why we're saying that. Our opinions on this 25-point plan of plagiarism, and we will. But before we really get into all of that, we really want to give a history of this because there's been a lot of developments that's been happening, but there's a historical context that's really important here to ground us in it before we get started, right? And so many people probably heard about the march that happened just recently at ASU. And then shortly after that, Crow put out a 25-point plan. However, that was not just in response to the protests that happened, that was in response to our 4 years of organizing. That was in response and a co-optation of our 25-page proposal. And so just wanted to start us off by grounding us in that. And so the Multicultural Solidarity Coalition was formed out of the Black Graduate Student Association. And we as Black students did not feel like there were enough resources or there were any resources for Black graduate students, let alone for undergraduate students of color. And so we decided we needed to change that. And that's how the Multicultural Solidarity Coalition was born out of. And what we began to do was hold community circles and use films such as the film Dear White People, which ASU actually tried to shut us down from showing, and the film You Racist Sexist Bigot. We use spaces like these to talk about in our community about the issues that we're facing at ASU as students of color. And what we found was there was a tremendous lack of resources, as well as a need for a safe place because of the hostile campus. So we used that. We built a broad coalition and used people based on their lived experiences and based on the community circles that we held to develop this proposal. And so this was the result of the years of our organizing, of our circles, of our conversations, and our coalition that built this proposal. And we've been continued to be ignored by Michael Crow. He refuses to meet with us, meet with the Multicultural Solidarity Coalition. And so we've continued to organize, and most recently during this uprising, we've had a large surge in the energy towards this work. And now finally Crow is responding, but is continuing to ignore us. And so just wanted to ground that this is a long-term struggle, and this did not happen overnight. This did not happen over the summer, but the fight is not over either. And to give you more updates on how much more work we have to do, Kat's gonna go into that.
Yeah, thank you. My name is Kat, and I'm gonna be going over updates since our last town hall. As Zara mentioned, we had our march a few weeks ago. After administration threatened BAC with suspension and expulsion if they participated or even promoted the march, they had to pull out from hosting it. So we hosted it ourselves. We marched to ASU police headquarters and through campus. We had a good turnout, and we're really thankful for everyone who came out and showed support. They didn't end up suspending any of us, likely because of the attention and bad press that they were getting. They tried to combat the bad press and gaslight us by saying that they never threatened suspension, but that is a lie. And so next, I'm going to go over updates on the university response. The response has been violent. President Crow released his 25-point plan for Black students, faculty, and staff a couple of weeks ago. This is what he came up with after a summer of listening and getting ideas and responses. We're going to do a deeper dive into the plan next, but basically there are some things that are seemingly good and that we should be excited about, but he hasn't included us in any of this. He took our ideas and plans that we spent countless hours working on, and he cut us out. President Crow does not want to meet with the MSC. He hasn't reached out to collaborate or have us involved in building the multicultural space. After the plan, After the plan came out, we sent him a direct email asking him to include us in this process, and there's been no response. We had to resort to texting Dr. Rund, who likes to give out his phone number to students to seem accessible. We asked him to try and get us a meeting with Dr. Crow, which he said he would get back to us this week with a time, but we still haven't heard anything. We don't know the size of the multicultural space, the timeline for it, or if it will include any of the things that we asked for in our proposal, any of the things that students of color need to feel safe on campus. So they have taken this work and cut us out of the actual implementation so that they can water it down to something that isn't what we asked for and not nearly enough of what we need. This is theft. It's co-optation. This is a predominantly white university continuing a long tradition of taking the labor of BIPOC students and calling it their own. And it has been a lot of labor, as Zara went over in the history of the MSC. Taking a few points from our proposal and cutting us out is violence against the students who spent years working on this, who had to sit through countless meetings and empty promises. The administration is stealing this work. On top of that, the administration is putting on town halls to pretend like they care about their students, faculty, and staff. President Crow, the graduate college, they're putting on these town halls to make us feel like we have access to them and for them to pretend like they hear us. They're co-opting social justice language to do this, to seem like they get it and that they're with us. But these town halls mean nothing. They ultimately do nothing. They're not changing any policies because of the concerns that we express, and they're not addressing the systemic issues that we're bringing up. They're just giving us lip service and then turning around and doing the same thing and recreating the same harm. All of this is wrong. It is violence. And we're going to go over this a bit more throughout our town hall. Up next is Alan.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Alan Gomez, and I teach in Justice Studies. And I'm going to talk a little bit about the Community Learning Fellowship. The folks in the MSC have always worked under the assumption that the work we do in the MSC already exists because of the work we do. And the Community Learning Fellowship is one of the ways that clearly represents that. The Community Learning Fellowship is not an RA-ship or a TA-ship. It's something that emerges from what graduate students are already doing. in their commitments to the communities that they're part of and the communities that they come from. Essentially, what the Community Learning Fellowship offers is a different way of funding graduate student experience, as well as creating new forms of accountability between ASU and different communities. As I said, the students are already doing this work. The CLF only catches up with them. It builds on existing genealogies that include the participatory and convivial research projects that have come out of feminist, Black, CRIP, and queer communities. What this means is that every department has an opportunity to rethink how it is that they reproduce knowledge and the politics of knowledge production. It's essentially a local proposition for every department and discipline to think about the ways in which they can implement the larger ideas of the Multicultural Solidarity Community proposal, which is a perspective that allows us to consider a transformation of the university that not only includes the politics of knowledge production, but also the community safety on campus, and particularly the relationship to punishment and policing. So finally, I want to pass it on to Ari, who will take us to the next conversation.
Okay, can we move to the next slide, please? Right, so Michael Crow said that ASU commits to establishing a multicultural space on campus and establishing and funding a working group to assess and begin design options for the space. Now that's a lot of words. Let's disregard working groups for now with the understanding that they are often a place where people most impacted are excluded. Does this really mean anything? The Multicultural Center in our proposal is meant to be a connection point for the many marginalized groups on campus, with a separate place of refuge, if you will, for each group. In this way, it's meant to provide anyone who feels unsafe in this white majority heteropatriarchal institution a safe place. It would also offer services like a resource center for undocumented students, a rape crisis center, and other types of resources. Now, what Michael Crow offers is a multicultural space. A space. Not a center, not a building, but a space. What is that? Can we move to the next slide? Again. A couple of these are like a bit exaggerated, of course, but a space could mean the middle of the field. It could mean a classroom. It could mean a therapy session. The concern is that there will be a shoddy effort to create a multicultural space without Multicultural Solidarity Coalition's input, and it will turn out to be like a room or a floor of a building where people of different cultures can hang out, which pretty much erases the original purpose of the Multicultural Center. Not only that, it would be highly unlikely to have the capacity to support the services the Multicultural Center would support. And that's it for me. I'll pass it on to there.
Thanks. Yeah, we just wanted to also talk a little bit about the language in the overall document that President Crow sent out, because we found it to be a little lacking. There were multiple points in the 25 points where the action was to recommit. And we ask ourselves, what is recommitting if not committing to doing nothing more than you were doing before? So in points number 3 and number 7, there's a recommitment to support. There's a recommitment to promote student success and well-being. And those are both such vague, empty statements that we pretty much consider number 3 and number 7 moot points, and in terms of the 25 overall points. And also looking at the language of number 13, it takes us back to what Dr. Gomez was saying about the community fellowships and how important those are, because not all of our students are oriented towards a traditional career. And ASU, again, with number 13, is kind of pushing that kind of capitalistic entrepreneurship, career advising, student success in the most kind of capitalistic framework. And it's also kind of insulting that this language here about inspire, that ASU needs to inspire students as if a lack of inspiration is somehow the problem. And we're certain that it's not. And also, Part of our proposal has really been about recruitment and retainment of Black students and students from other marginalized communities. And we were kind of very disappointed to see that there were very few points that actually touched on retaining and recruiting Black students, and especially looking at number 17, that they're only interested in or only committing to appointing one Black tenured faculty member and only to Barrett Honors College. And we're asking for there to be cultural excellence scholar support in all parts of the ASU campuses, not just in the Honors College. And if you want to go to the next slide, I wanted to also show this video to show how dangerous it is that ASU is not only taking our language and turning it back and emptying it of all its meaning and giving it back to us. And we've seen this happen with language like community of care, that's been used to kind of as the branding for their reopening that we consider to be a violent act against the community, and not done in terms of care. And so this video is just an example of another way that ASU is taking the language of this movement, emptying it of its meaning, and giving it back to us. And so this video is of John Gold, who's from the director of the School of Criminology and Criminal Justice, and you'll see what his definition of defunding is.
Communities around the welcome back. You've heard about this in communities around the country, the idea of defunding the police department. And then you think, well, what will happen? Will communities have to police themselves? It really is kind of a very deep-rooted issue in our communities. And a lot of people are very, very passionate about this. This morning, joining us is John Gold, Director of Criminology and Criminal Justice at ASU. So defunding the police, a lot of people think, it's not going to work. Has there been any research done on any community in the entire world where community polices themselves and it actually works?
Well, you're combining a number of concepts that are actually somewhat distinct. Defunding the police is not the way it's being used right now is not about taking resources away from police per se, but making sure that efforts are being spent on other aspects of social problems earlier.
So the point being there that he makes an argument that defunding actually is not about taking away resources from the police. And we would argue that it is precisely that, and that we are asking for ASU police to be defunded and abolished, and to tell us that defunding has nothing to do with moving resources away from the police is not only co-optation of our language, but really becomes a lie at a certain point. And so to get more into these points about the police at ASU, I'm going to turn it over to Mastani to talk about the points 25 and 22 in Crow's list.
Thank you, Kelly. I am Mastani. My pronouns are she and hers. So points 22 and 25 are probably like the most disturbing and disgusting points in all of Crow's proposal. The 22nd point talks about the appointment of an individual named Ehsan Zafar to launch and lead a multi-college interdisciplinary initiative to help reduce inequality in the United States. And then point 25 talks about giving bachelor degrees to ASU PD because they think that if cops have bachelor degrees, they won't be racist. So these are two disturbing points, and both of them are kind of related because both of them talk about state and ASU. So first, we want to kind of go through the current process that ASU PD has, like for hiring and training. So if you see like the pictures here, they're the current process. And point B is about the the racial sensitivity training that ASU PD currently has. So you could go through these processes, and then you could also see some pictures of ICE and how there has been reports by students, especially undocumented students who do not feel comfortable on campus because of ICE's presence. Could we move to the next slide? So first, we want to talk about these 2 points for separately. So giving bachelor degrees to cops, right? This is not what we were asking for. This is not what MSC was asking for. This is not what other organizations representing BIPOC individuals, representing women, representing LGBTQ plus communities. This is not what we were asking, right? ASU actually did the opposite of what we were asking, right? And our ask is that we do not have problems with like the specific police officers, but the whole institution of police itself. So ASU thinks, oh, if we award bachelor degrees to these cops and maybe they will learn how to be anti-racist and that will help ASU students. No, our fight isn't against those officers. Our fight is against the institution of police itself, because the institution of police in the United States, at least, is anti-Black. We're fighting the system, the institution, not the police officers. So even if all the police officers are very woke, enlightened, liberal, progressive, and even if they're people of color, that does not matter, right? Because the system they're working on, the institution they're working on hurts people of color and especially Black individuals in the United States. So bachelor degrees was kind of like the slap on the face of BIPOC people, and it made no sense. The second point is the Department of like Homeland Security and how they're going to be involved. First, Department of Homeland Security has a history of violence. We have been seeing it like since years, like since Trump came to office. That thing has been emerging, right? We see it in the news, what ICE is doing. And we want more of their involvement, not exactly ICE, but ICE is part of that department, but that department's more involvement in our community, right? We do not want that, right? We already feel threatened by these state institutions like police and ICE and Homeland Security and all they do to, quote, protect our communities. We already don't like that, and they're getting more of their involvement. And the other issue with that, the 22nd point, was that it was very vague. It was very difficult to understand like exactly how this person, Ehsan Zafar, is going to help reduce inequality or inequity within our universities. And the last thing is that it is encouraging more state involvement, and it is taking power away from grassroots organizations like MSC and other organizations on all 4 ASU campuses, right? So it is, as organizations, right, we are trying to help our communities, right? Our BIPOC communities, our LGBT communities, our women, we're trying to help them. And they're not letting us help. They're instead appointing people to help. And these people we cannot trust, right? We cannot trust the government right now. We do not know whether these people will be allowed to help us or will not allowed to help us, but will they be able to help us the way we want, or like how qualified they are to help us, right? We don't know if our opinions will be heard when they are helping us and protecting us. So that is like MSC's issues with points 25 and points 22 of Crow's proposal.
So as Kelly mentioned earlier, MSC stands in solidarity with BLM Phoenix Metro, Mass Liberation Arizona, and all other orgs across the nation who are calling to defund police. Like the Phoenix Union High School School District, we demand that police officers be removed from ASU campuses in order to create a more welcoming, safer, and supportive environment for our students, staff, and faculty of color. We call for the more than $9 million to be gained from eliminating police presence from campus to be reinvested into MSC's Multicultural Center and other resources for our community members, especially those who are most impacted by police violence. Can we go to the next slide, please? So in response to widespread calls to defund ASU PD, admin has given the following reasons why it's against defunding. Sorry, one second, next slide. But these reasons are inadequate because they are trying to understate the power, authority, and hostile presence that ASU PD already has on our campuses. First, admin argues that they can pay for MSC's Multicultural Center without having to defund ASU PD, so MSC should stop our calls for defunding. But even if the center is funded by other means, the hostile presence of ASU PD still contradicts the goals of MSC and the Multicultural Center to make the university a more welcoming, safe, and supportive space for BIPOC community members. Moreover, the $9 million to be gained from defunding can still be reinvested into other more effective policing alternatives, such as trained sexual violence advocates and mental health professionals. Second, admin argues that if ASU PD is defunded, then local police like Tempe PD would have to start coming onto our campuses, but ASU and local PD already have a strong partnership, and local PD is already allowed to come onto our ASU campuses, whether they're in pursuit of a crime that they just saw committed, or if ASU PD needs help processing a crime scene. Finally, admin argues that since ASU is an open campus, if we defund ASU PD, then local police departments would have to be armed while they're on our campuses. But this ignores how every single ASU police officer is already required to carry a weapon on campus today. Next slide, please. According to ASU PD, about 96% of its funding goes to, quote, employee salaries, employee-related expenses, insurance, and retirement funds. Since ASU will not release its exact budget spent on police, we estimate, based on police salaries reported by the state press, that ASU's PD total annual budget is a minimum of $9 million each year. We are outraged that ASU PD continues to increase their budget every year despite public backlash for the brutality against Black and Brown ASU community members. In the last 8 years alone, ASU has increased their budgets for police salaries by 56%, skyrocketing from $5.5 million in 2012 to $8.7 million in 2019. To put that into perspective, during the same time period, the university increased their budget for counseling service salaries by only 2%. Overall, the university spends three times more money on ASU PD salaries than it does counseling services. Ultimately, ASU needs to demonstrate their commitment to the well-being of all students. Their lack of funding for support services, yet extravagant amounts of funding for policing, shows that they have not actually considered how to ensure that the Black and Brown students on campus have a safe and welcoming environment where they will be academically and emotionally supportive. Defunding the police will not only make campuses safer for Black and Brown students, it will also open up opportunities for the university to ensure that all students get what they need to thrive. With that, I'll pass it on to Zara to talk about how ASU creates a hostile campus.
So there's a long history of ASU's hostile campus, and that's actually one of the reasons that we even started the fight for a multicultural center, because what we were experiencing on campus was people like this man who calls himself Brother Dean, who tells women they deserve to be raped. And as a teacher's assistant, I actually experienced students coming into my classroom crying, women coming into my classroom crying because they'd just been eye-raped by this man. He also goes on racist tangents, saying BLM are racist thugs. He also defiles and defames Muslim students. And so I've asked in my capacity as a teacher and asked in my capacity as a student to remove him off campus, and ASU says that he's protected by free speech. On top of that, we've had actual white supremacist groups flyer on campus every single semester since I've been here, and this is my 5th year. And when we go to the administration, to the deans who say when something racist happens, come to us, when we go to them and we ask them, hey, can you put out a statement denouncing white supremacists and Nazis. What we were told repeatedly was that ASU's Charter of Inclusion includes Nazis and white supremacists, so that because they're an open campus, and because of freedom of speech, they will not denounce when these white supremacist and Nazi flyers are posted all over campus. And this is what we mean when we say it's a hostile campus for students of color. On top of the fact that we have, open Nazis and white supremacists, we even have the College Republicans United. The College Republicans were united, were outed last year for being straight up white supremacists, down to the point where they were actually doing Hail Hitler signs at their meetings. They were talking about eugenics of Black and disabled people. I mean, the level of vitriol in these chats that were leaked should have been enough to disband them as a registered student org. And it should be noted that the Multicultural Solidarity Coalition is intentionally not a student organization, because in doing this work in the Black Graduate Student Association, the backlash and retaliation we received from the administration made us feel like we would not have the freedom if we were a student org. But you see on the right, ASU allows the College Republicans United to remain a student club, even though they've said that they were Nazis and have proposed eugenics. On top of that, you have the fact, so when this happened earlier this year, we see the same College Republican United, who ASU investigated last year and found nothing wrong because they're still a registered student club. They're now raising money for the Kenosha shooter, this domestic terrorist. This is what we mean when we say it's a hostile campus. They protect white supremacists. They protect misogynists. They protect people who are Islamophobic. But then on the other side, when we try to do a protest, they say that they're going to suspend us. Or what happened just yesterday, Alexia, who is a student activist in the student government and also a student journalist, and is on the left. And where is the freedom of speech that the same freedom of speech that this guy gets to irate people with, we don't have on the left? When she doesn't have freedom of speech, when she spoke up, she actually, on her personal Twitter, her personal opinions got her fired from the state press. This is the type of things where we're talking about. It's not only a hostile campus, but it is not safe, and we do not have the same freedoms as students of color, as those on the left versus those on the right. On top of this, we have the fact that it's a hostile campus because when we say defund the police, we're often told about school shooters, for example, right? But then when we look at what happens to school shooters, the campus security, like in the Parkland case, has never protected us. And in fact, ASU police themselves bragged that they haven't discharged their weapons in over a decade. And yet we're told we need the police to protect us from shooters, which we see is not the case, and to protect us from rapists. However, another organization in our coalition, Sun Devils Against Sexual Assault, which has filed a Title IX claim against the university and represents victims who've been raped at the university, is most recently advocating for a victim who had to drop out of ASU because after being raped at ASU, the ASU police would not investigate that rape and actually delayed the rape kit. This is what we mean when we say it's a hostile campus. On top of that, we see that what the other side gets to say, like the recent op-ed in the state press, which wrote about, thank you, let's thank ASU Police Department, not defund them. And yet when we say defund them, it gets people like Alexia kicked out of state press. So we're seeing that there is no freedom of speech. There's only freedom on the right. There's only conservative freedom of speech, but there is no freedom for those on the left. There's no freedom for students of color. And this is what contributes to the hostile campus and why we need a whole center. We do not need a space. So now Lexi's gonna go into some of our future moves. And then here's a few other pieces. So this was the case that I told you about ASU Police Department blaming someone for their own sexual assault.
Thank you, Zara. And wow, I feel like I just need a minute. Okay, so to talk a little bit about our future moves, I'm gonna need to go back a little bit because the actions that the university has taken, so the 25 points and the creation of the various committees that they've done, those actions don't reflect our proposal, which was crafted very intentionally and carefully and has yet to receive the close reading that it requires. So we actually predicted the behavior of the university in our proposal when we published it and sent it to President Crow in July. So I just want to read the implementation section of the proposal, and it's here so you can read along. The Multicultural Solidarity Coalition has been leading the push for a multicultural center since 2016. We, the organizers of this proposal, are largely students of color and femmes. As such, it is critical that our role in this work not be erased. We also acknowledge the history of the ASU administration responding to these requests without real intention to implement them. In particular, we draw attention to the practice of requiring student groups like our own to take on the burden of crafting highly technical plans for implementation. We are aware that the university employs specialists who work professionally in dedicated roles to create budgets, spaces, and plans for logistics. So we call upon the university administration to show real intent to make the contents of this proposal a reality. We cannot accept the burden of producing all the plans for implementation. With that said, we require a seat at the table. It is our desire to continue our involvement as members of the planning committee. And when the time comes to implement the contents of this proposal, we intend to be present. We intend to hold our vision and ensure that in making it a reality, we do not become lost. So recent actions taken by President Crow, so he's reached out to the Council of Coalitions and they have graciously brought us into the upcoming meetings with Crow, but the university itself hasn't actually talked to us. They haven't brought us in or communicated directly with MSC. And so this is why we've been demanding from the beginning that President Crow meets with us. Crow's actually been vociferous in his refusal of engaging with us as MSC, and we are being treated with silence. We explicitly said that we also don't want to be the ones doing all of the work and the university needs to do this work itself. However, if we are going to be brought in on the committees, or if we are, as it looks like, going to have to force our way onto the committees, then we need to be paid for the work that we're going to do. So making students of color in particular, the unpaid overworked consultants of the university during a global pandemic is not what we asked for. So we are also participating in the boycott of State Press, the ASU student newspaper, because of the recent firing of Alexia Isaias, and that which Zara mentioned also. I'm not sure if I'm pronouncing their last name correctly, so excuse me if I'm not. For making a joke about the blue alert that we all received when a cop got shot in the line of duty. I think that was yesterday or the day before. We stand with her as a young leftist thinker, writer, and agitator, and also as a woman of color who's been persecuted and punished for having a radical analysis. The outrage at the refusal to perform shock and horror in response to occasional violence done unto our violent police force, the fist of the state, is violent. So we're supposed to care if the fist of the state gets bruised or cut. And so in thinking about this, I wanted to bring in the quote from June Jordan, the question, what would happen if every time they killed a Black man, they killed a cop? Do you think the accident rate would lower substantially? All right, so moving on, we want to also continue holding the university accountable, working with as many people as possible, growing and sharpening our political analysis, and continuing to refuse and question the university's austerity measures. So I guess Miranda is gonna go next.
Thanks, Lexi. So I'm going to talk a little bit about what's going on at other universities. ASU is trying to make us think that our work is not valid and not important and not needed based on their current offerings and resources for students. But we know that abolitionist work and student work is often silenced, violently shut down, and or co-opted by universities themselves, as we have seen with our proposal. Our work in the MSc is forward thinking and we're not alone. At the University of Arizona, the Coalition for Justice at University of Arizona has formed, and they have formed the United Campus Workers of Arizona, which has now been part of the national movement of the Communications Workers of America. They're joined by many other institutions across the country in support. Michigan, another institution in the news a lot recently, had graduate students in our age strike over the defunding of campus police, the way the university was handling the pandemic, freezes on university rent, and timeline and funding extensions given the pandemic. They were threatened and they withheld their labor, making some progress, but marginally. We're seeing the same thing across the universities across the country. Recently, in the past year or so, in the UC system, students at Santa Cruz were on strike over cost of living adjustments. In all these universities, we see that there's not enough care of students and those doing the labor at universities. They're tried to be silenced, but this movement is bigger than just ASU, and we hope to join the ranks of all of our peers across the country. I will pass it along to Zara.
So that is our town hall. We want to tell you how to get involved in it, and then we're going to open it up for questions. So make sure if you have any questions and you're watching on the town hall right now, go ahead and put those into the chat. As far as how to get involved, there's various levels of engagement and different ways that you can plug in. If you are at ASU or an ASU alum and would like to be directly involved, message us and we can get you in. We do have weekly meetings, and there's a lot of different ways you can get involved. If you are a professor, you can sign on and also lend your support and work. If you're in a department, you can get the department to sign on in support of this. And then make sure to follow us on our Facebook and our Instagram. Those are the best ways to support, to stay amidst in kind of what's happening next in the campaign. And then also, there is a change.org petition. And if you're a community member or anything, please sign on to that. If you're at ASU, we have a Google form that you can sign on to. And then we're continuing to put pressure on the institution at this juncture. It's critical that we make sure that this co-optation doesn't become what is created, because it would be a shame if after all of our labors for almost half a decade now, become something that we never asked for or never wanted in the first place. And so if you have any connections to CRO, to the university, if you're a donor to the university, leverage that power and privilege and use it to support us and let the administration know that we should be, the Multicultural Solidarity Coalition should be brought to the table. Right now, they're bringing different organizations, some of which are organizations that we're also a part of, but the Multicultural Solidarity Coalition still has not been recognized as the author of our proposal, which was co-opted by Michael Crow. So if you can lend your voice to this cause, we definitely can use all the support that we can get. And to stay apprised, stay on our social media. We'll also be sharing it out through our partners like Black Lives Matter, Phoenix Metro, and the other partnering orgs that we work with, to make sure that we hold the administration accountable and to make sure that we get we get everything that we've been asking for, because this proposal, it's more than just a space. It's a change in the ideology of the institution. So with that, I think we can open it up to questions. You have any questions? I will, one question I see, there was a reporter from the state press who asked for to interview us, and we're actually boycotting the state press because of what they did to Alexia. If you're gonna silence Black and brown leftist voices, we are not going to engage in that. So unless you want to hire Alexia back, we're not going to take your interview. Any other questions or any other points of clarification that people would like to have? So there was a question about speaking to undergraduates around the MSc proposals critical to their education. Even though the Multicultural Solidarity Coalition was started by Black graduate students, it's always really been something that, while it will also improve Black and other POC graduate students, it's really for undergraduate students. Most of us who've been at other institutions have had the experience of most other state universities have diversity offices, have multicultural centers. So when we came here and we saw that was missing, we really wanted to make sure that undergrads, especially as the largest public university in the country, we wanted to make sure that all students of color get access to the same resources that we had access to. And many of these things are critical for recruitment and retention. Like the tutoring center, we're asking for students of color, the cultural excellence scholars, we're asking for them to have their own tutoring center. And there's reasons behind that, such as the research that shows that when students of color study together, you improve their retention rates and their grades and their graduation rates. There's research that shows when students of color don't feel safe, they will drop out. And we just mentioned that one student, undergraduate student that did drop out of ASU because after getting raped, how ASU PD actually, prevented her from getting any justice. And it's not the only case. When we were doing our listening sessions, we heard from countless students of color, undergraduate students of color, who are leaving the institution or transferring to online so they can get off this hostile, predominantly white institution. And so really we're fighting for an institution that can serve students of color better, and that definitely will make a huge difference in PLC undergraduates' lives. Does anyone else from the coalition want to speak to that more?
I guess I can speak to it to answer the question, like, why is our MSC's proposal like critical to the education. And I think I just want to add, like, to make like a safe environment. Like, I'm pretty sure like a lot of us from BIPOC communities and LGBT communities and women, you know, even if these things are not in place, what we're asking for, they have succeeded. But they have succeeded by doing 4 times the work a white straight man has to do, right? We have to put in so much more work. And what we're trying to accomplish, like what MSC is trying to accomplish, is that perhaps we can, you know, make it easier for our communities, or like make it easier for us, people like me, to do the work, you know, to complete their education, right? Right now, all of us here, we have to put in a lot of emotional labor, right? We have to focus on our academics, and we have to work for our communities. And that hinders us from our education. And most white individuals, most white men do not have to worry about this. They can just focus on their education, and they could just, you know, do their thing in 4 years and just get away and just graduate from college, and like it's easy, right? But it is not easy for me as a woman. I have to think, right? To like how I'm gonna live, how I'm gonna survive, in addition to completing my education. So this is how we intend to just help people, you know, like brown women, black women, indigenous women, trans people, and non-binary individuals, and people from all diverse backgrounds should have that same privilege as white people do on this campus, just to complete their education without any emotional labor. And that we know is going to take time, but we want the ASU administration to start working on it as soon as possible, as they're supposed to. So that is all I want to add for that question.
I can comment on this as well. So I know the question is, speak to the undergraduates about why the MSc proposal is critical to their education. But I also think that the efforts around organizing and the voice that we're kind of representing and developing our coalition and our analysis is really important to everyone at the university's education, their political education, about the structure of the university, because one of the things that we're doing is challenging the discourse, the really white supremacist discourse that we've heard from many ASU administrators, that says that the whole campus is a multicultural center, and we shouldn't just, you know, we're leaving out white, you know, men students when we designate particular spaces to meet the needs of particular groups. And so this, part of the reason why I think we're a critical voice or a necessary voice at the moment at ASU is because the everyday happenings of ASU, the everyday analysis from the administration down, is incredibly loud and incredibly white supremacist. And they've recently recounted that argument that they think that the whole campus can be a multicultural center. So they recently conceded and said that actually we recognize that this is like not, you know, the best stance to have. However, there's yeah, I mean, there's no even recognition for the level of violence that that perspective needs. It's just saying, oh, we thought wrong, so we changed our minds now, and it's all good. So I think that the work that we're doing around campus, on campus, online, whatever that universe is, in organizing, is also critical to the education of the undergraduates at ASU in particular.
So we have another question. Let's talk a little bit about how ASU faculty, staff, and students can help MSC hold ASU administration accountable. Does anyone want to take a swing at this?
I can speak to it, Zara, if you want me to. So all students and like faculty, whether undergrad or grad, you know, first you can get obviously involved with MSC, sign our proposal like ASAP. That is like, I guess, the biggest step you can take. And like, if you want to get more involved in like organizing and stuff, um, um, like become like a part of our like organization, feel free to like DM us on like on our Instagram. So follow our social medias would be the second step after signing the proposal. Sign the proposal, follow the social medias. And the third is, if you want to get involved with organizing, just DM us on our Instagram and we'll get you all set up. And what you can do besides all like, you know, getting involved with us, is that keep like maybe emailing ASU administration, or, you know, keep talking to your professors about this issue. Keep talking about the Multicultural Center, keep bringing it up. If you hold another leadership organization, another leadership position within a different cultural organization, that is great. You know, keep having those conversations. So ASU administration feels all that pressure from different ways. And I feel that would like build more moment for the momentum. And I know Professor Alan Gomez wants to add to this.
Thank you, Mastani. I just want to briefly say that, as I had spoken earlier about the Community Learning Fellowship, but the proposal itself is a way for staff, students, and faculty in their departments to ask the questions of how they can make the proposal live locally, because there is embedded in it a different set of relationships between students and staff and faculty, because it just isn't changing structures. It's the kind of ways in which we work with each other and the kind of projects that we can create together. So the proposal itself is really something that every department can look at and say, okay, how do we respond to these important intellectual provocations that are deeply researched and are coming out of the everyday experiences of people who are written out structurally of having access to what is essentially something that the charter claims everyone should have access to. So to just want to always remind us that the document itself, as others have said, it needs a deep read. And that's one of the foundational ways that folks can support, is in your local places and departments and organizations and faculty, women organizations and student organizations, to have this conversation that begins with the proposal and that doesn't negotiate away the ideas of the proposal before the conversation with the people who have written.
I also just speak to one other point. I think there's in supporting us, it's important like to support, you know, sometimes when we say support students of color, it can be kind of tokenizing. And ASU has used that tokenization in a harmful way. To give a little context, I will say, to start off, as someone who's not from Arizona, Arizona can sometimes feel like the sunken place. If you've seen Get Out, as an outsider, that's what it felt like when I moved here. And I see this being used against us, where they find Black and brown people and they put them high up in places of power, whether to represent us or to speak on our behalf, or to just be like, oh, well, students of color don't believe that because this one Black student doesn't believe it, right? And that's a very dangerous narrative, and why tokenization is harmful. And so, you know, there's another dangerous narrative that we as students of color are being influenced by someone other than us, as if we are so inferior we can't think ourselves, and that that our ideas of abolition, or our ideas of, you know, any of the ideas that one might feel is radical, such as defunding the police, this came out of our lived experience living in a white supremacist violent institution and country. This comes from the lived experience, and it's not something that can be denied. And it doesn't matter if you find one Black person that objects to it. And so I think that's an important thing that we need to be brought to the table. You cannot just bring any old Black student and have them speak on our behalf. We've been situated in the community. We've been working here and representing something much larger than us. And so that I think that's just an important point, because that's another way that we can get co-opted. And we saw some of this happening in the most recent teaching, where someone mentioned how a person of color mentioned how defunding the police was a white privilege. And defunding the police is a movement that was started by Black people out of necessity, out of survival. And so it's important that these narratives don't get used against us and manipulated. So again, support us, the Multicultural Solidarity Coalition, help us get into these spaces and help also change this narrative. We do have radical analysis, which comes from our lived experience, and it's not something that can be denied, even though they may try to do that with tokens. So that's what we'll leave y'all with. We hope that you get involved and you stay involved. It's a movement, not a moment. It's a long-term struggle. We're 4 years running, and we'll go as long as we have to go. Oftentimes the administration tries to stop things by putting it in committees. They try to like drag this out. For example, many of the people who began in MSc, who are undergraduates, are no longer here because they've graduated. And this is how the institution tries to kill campaigns, by just dragging them out so that we all graduate, but that's not gonna work. We're not going anywhere. This is a movement, not a moment. So please stay here for the long run, and we look forward to continuing to push forward. Thank you all.